You wake up with a knot in your stomach, another day of second-guessing yourself, hesitating when you should speak up, shrinking when you should stand tall. Sound familiar? Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That simple idea is the foundation of unshakable confidence, because here's the truth most people miss. Confidence isn't about being fearless or having everything figured out. It's about knowing exactly where your power lies, and Stoicism gives you that map. Think about the last time you held back in a meeting or let someone cross your boundaries because you didn't want to rock the boat. What if I told you that the same philosophy that guided Roman generals and leaders through chaos can help you reclaim your voice today? Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending life's challenges don't exist. It's about cutting through the noise to focus on what you can control, your choices, your actions, your responses. And when you master that, you stop waiting for permission to be bold. This video isn't just another pep talk. We're diving deep into the Stoic mindset that turns hesitation into assertiveness. You'll discover how to silence the inner critic that says you're not ready, how to stand firm when pressure tries to sway you, and most importantly, how to act with unshakable conviction even when doubt creeps in. Because the world doesn't reward the timid. It rewards those who know their worth and refuse to apologize for taking up space. So if you're ready to stop playing small and start living with the kind of confidence that doesn't waver when things get tough, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Confidence, the way most people chase it, is a mirage, always just out of reach because they're looking in the wrong direction. Stoicism flips the script. Picture this: two co-workers receive the same harsh criticism. One spirals, desperate to prove their worth. The other listens, weighs the feedback, and moves forward without crumbling. What's the difference? Not talent, not luck, but a simple Stoic principle: understanding what's truly theirs to control. Epictetus, the philosopher born into slavery, put it bluntly: some things are up to us and some things are not. Your reputation, not up to you. How you prepare, how you respond, the integrity you bring to your work, that's where your power lies. Modern life bombards us with metrics, likes, promotions, praise, that trick us into tying our worth to things outside our control. But real confidence isn't measured by applause. It's built on something unshakable: your ability to choose your stance no matter what happens around you. Think about the last time you felt small after a setback. Maybe a project failed or someone dismissed your idea. How much of that pain came from the event itself, and how much came from the story you told yourself about what it meant? Stoicism teaches us to strip away the layers of assumption and see the raw truth. Setbacks are just information. They don't define you unless you let them. Here's the practice that changes everything. Next time you face criticism, pause. Ask yourself, is this about something I can improve, or is it noise? If it's useful, absorb it. If it's not, let it pass like a cloud. This is the Stoic art of discernment, separating the signal from the static. Because confidence isn't about being bulletproof. It's about knowing which battles are yours to fight. So here's a question to sit with. When have you mistaken external approval for true confidence? That moment you hesitated until you got a nod from the room, or bit your tongue because you feared ruffling feathers. What if the only permission you needed was your own? The moment you grasp the dichotomy of control is the moment you unlock a new way of moving through the world. One where your energy isn't wasted on battles you can't win. Picture Seneca writing to his friend Lucilius during a storm at sea. The waves raged, the ship groaned, but his words were steady. What's the point of fearing what you cannot change? Focus instead on holding your course. That's the essence of this Stoic tool. It's not about ignoring life's storms. It's about knowing where to plant your feet. Let's make this practical. Take a blank sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side, list everything you can't control in a challenging situation: other people's opinions, market fluctuations, even the weather. On the other side, write what's yours to command: your preparation, your attitude, the effort you choose to invest. Most people spend their lives obsessing over the first column, draining their confidence drop by drop. But when you shift your focus to the second, that's where real power lies. Here's why this works. When you stop tying your self-worth to outcomes you can't guarantee, whether it's landing a client or winning someone's approval, you free yourself to act with boldness. Think of an archer in ancient times. Their job wasn't to ensure the arrow hit the target wind or a moving enemy could interfere. Their job was to draw the bow with skill and release with focus. The rest, not their burden to carry. Now apply that to your life. Maybe you've hesitated to ask for a raise because you're fixated on whether your boss will say yes. The dichotomy of control asks, is their response yours to dictate? No, but is showing up prepared, articulating your value, and making the ask firmly within your power. Absolutely, that shift changes everything. You stop waiting for guarantees and start taking grounded, confident action. Seneca's letters are full of this wisdom. He reminds us that uncertainty isn't the enemy, it's the backdrop against which courage shines. When you accept that some factors will always be beyond your grasp, you stop resisting reality and start working with it. That's the secret of people who seem unshakable. They're not immune to doubt, they've just trained themselves to pour their energy where it counts. So here's your challenge. Pick a situation that's been weighing on you: a difficult conversation, a career leap, even a personal goal. Run it through the 2-column exercise. Then ask yourself, how much mental space have I been giving to the uncontrollable? And what would happen if I redirected that energy toward what I can influence? The answer might just surprise you. Fear isn't the enemy, it's the forge where courage is tempered. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire plagued by war and plague, wrote in his private journal, "The obstacle is the way, not around it, not despite it, but through it." That's the Stoic secret to courage, seeing adversity not as a barrier, but as the very path to becoming stronger. Take Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who stood alone against Julius Caesar's rise to tyranny. While others bent to power, Cato refused, even when it cost him everything. On the night of his death, he calmly read Plato's dialogues on the immortality of the soul before taking his own life on principle. What Stoicism gave him wasn't recklessness, but clarity. Some things are worth losing for, and fear loses its grip when you know your values are unshakable. That's the shift we need today. We think courage means the absence of fear, but the Stoics knew better. It's feeling the knot in your stomach and speaking up anyway. It's knowing the risk and choosing to act with integrity regardless. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, illness, and the weight of an empire, yet his meditations reveal a man who woke up each morning asking, "What's necessary?" Not what's easy. Here's how this applies to you. That presentation you're dreading, the difficult conversation you've been avoiding, Stoicism asks you to reframe them. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" ask, "What will I learn by trying?" Every obstacle is a chance to practice virtues like resilience and discipline, muscles that only grow when tested. So let's pause here. What's one fear that's been holding you back? Maybe it's the fear of rejection when pitching an idea, or the vulnerability of setting boundaries. Now imagine carrying that fear like Cato or Marcus Aurelius would, not as a weight, but as a signal, a signpost pointing you toward the growth you're meant to undertake. Because the Stoics didn't conquer fear by ignoring it. They walked straight through it and came out the other side unbreakable. This is where theory meets practice. Next time fear whispers that you're not ready, answer with action. Start small. Send the email you've been overthinking. Voice the opinion you've been silencing. Each time you do, you're not just overcoming a moment, you're rewiring a lifetime of hesitation. The Stoics called this the discipline of action, and its power compounds. Every act of courage, no matter how small, is a brick in the foundation of unshakable confidence. Think of fear like cold water. The longer you stand at the edge, the more paralyzing it seems. But dive in and your body adapts, the shock fades. Soon, you're moving freely where you once trembled. That's the Stoic approach to adversity. Stop measuring the temperature and jump. The water's fine, or if it's not, you'll learn to swim. Either way, you won't grow by staying dry. Marcus Aurelius left us a challenge. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, so here's your invitation. Pick one fear, just one, and confront it this week not as a victim, but as a student. What if the thing you're avoiding is the very experience that will forge your boldest self? There's a quiet strength in the way Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, framed discipline. We should train the mind like we train the body, not just for show, but for enduring what life demands. That's the missing link between discipline and confidence. Most people think discipline is about grinding through tasks, but Stoics saw it as something far deeper, a daily rehearsal for the moments that matter. When you've practiced standing firm in small things, you don't crumble when the stakes are high. Think about modern habits like morning routines. Why do successful people swear by them? It's not just about productivity. It's about winning the first battle of the day, the one against hesitation. Every time you choose to rise early, to move your body, to focus your mind before distractions pile up, you're not just checking a box. You're reinforcing a truth. I am someone who follows through. That's the same principle Musonius taught 2,000 years ago when he insisted that philosophy isn't just for lectures, it's for living. Here's where most people get stuck. They wait for motivation to strike before taking action, not realizing motivation is the reward for action. The Stoics knew this. They didn't wait to feel brave before facing challenges. They trained in advance so bravery became instinct. Picture a soldier drilling formations until muscle memory takes over. When chaos hits, they don't freeze, they respond. Your mind works the same way. Discipline isn't about punishment, it's about preparation. Let's make this personal. Where in your life does hesitation creep in? Maybe it's the pause before asking for what you deserve, or the split-second delay when you should defend a boundary. That's your training ground. Musonius argued that every small act of discipline, choosing the salad over the burger, speaking up in a meeting instead of staying silent, is a vote for the person you're becoming. Over time, those votes add up to unshakable self-trust. Modern science backs this up. Researchers call it habit stacking, tiny, consistent actions that rewire your brain's pathways. The Stoics called it the art of living. Same principle, different era. The key is starting small. Don't vow to meditate for an hour daily if you've never sat still for 5 minutes. Build your discipline like a fire, one spark at a time. Here's your challenge. Pick one arena where discipline could sharpen your assertiveness. Maybe it's preparing thoroughly for conversations you usually wing, or setting a timer to limit social media scrolling so you reclaim time for skill building. Whatever it is, tie it to a deeper why. Musonius taught that discipline without purpose is just exhaustion. But when you connect it to your values like integrity, growth, or freedom, it becomes fuel. Imagine two versions of yourself, one who lets comfort dictate their days, and one who treats discipline as a gift to their future self. Which one speaks with more conviction? Which one trusts their own voice? The answer's obvious, because discipline isn't about restriction, it's about liberation. The kind that lets you walk into any room, any conversation, any challenge, knowing you've already done the work to belong there. So ask yourself, what's one small, repeatable action that could become your daily rehearsal for confidence? Not a grand gesture, but something so simple you can't rationalize skipping it. That's where your power lies, in the repetition, the showing up, the quiet proof to yourself that you're someone who keeps promises, especially the ones you make to yourself. Seneca once wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days to eat only the plainest food, wear your roughest clothing, and ask yourself, is this what I used to fear?" That's voluntary hardship in action, not suffering for its own sake, but deliberately stepping into discomfort to prove to yourself that you're stronger than your circumstances. The Stoics didn't see comfort as the goal, they saw it as the enemy of growth, because here's the paradox: the more you shield yourself from difficulty, the smaller your world becomes. Take public speaking, a fear so common it outranks death for some people. The average person avoids it like a plague, sweating at the mere thought of standing before a crowd. But the Stoic approach: seek it out, volunteer for that presentation, join a debate club, speak up in meetings first before your nerves have time to talk you out of it. Every time you do, you're not just conquering a fear, you're teaching your brain that discomfort isn't a threat but a classroom. Seneca called these training days, moments where you deliberately choose the harder path to build resilience for life's unavoidable challenges. He'd take cold baths, sleep on hard beds, even fast for days, not because he enjoyed deprivation, but because he knew comfort could become a cage. Modern life makes it easy to forget this. We've got apps to avoid waiting, filters to hide imperfections, endless distractions to numb discomfort. But what happens when real hardship comes? Loss, failure, uncertainty. If you've never practiced discomfort, you'll break under its weight. Here's the key: voluntary hardship isn't about punishment, it's about reclaiming agency. When you choose to walk into a challenge, whether it's a cold shower at dawn or a tough conversation you've been avoiding, you transform from a passive victim of circumstances to an active participant in your own growth. That shift changes everything. Suddenly, the things that used to scare you become opportunities to test your mettle. So let's make this practical. Think of one comfort zone you've been clinging to. Maybe it's always saying yes to avoid conflict, or scrolling through your phone instead of facing silence. What if just once this week you did the opposite? Decline that invitation you don't really want. Sit with your thoughts for 10 unplugged minutes. The discomfort will pass, but the confidence it leaves behind. That sticks. This is how warriors train, how athletes prepare, how leaders build endurance. They don't wait for crisis to reveal their weaknesses, they expose them in advance. Like a tree strengthening its roots against future storms, voluntary hardship lets you grow sturdy where it counts. Seneca put it best: difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. So ask yourself, where have you been too comfortable, and what small step could you take today to stretch beyond it? The magic lies in repetition. One cold shower won't make you fearless, just as one speech won't cure glossophobia. But each time you willingly embrace discomfort, you rewrite an old story, the one that says you can't handle hard things. That's the Stoic secret. Confidence isn't born from avoiding struggle, but from proving to yourself, again and again, that you're capable of meeting it head-on. Here's a counterintuitive truth. The most confident people aren't the ones who ignore potential pitfalls, they're the ones who stare them down in advance. The Stoics called this practice premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. Seneca put it bluntly: what is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. Rehearsal softens the blow. Think of it like a mental fire drill, by imagining the worst-case scenario, not to dwell on it, but to disarm it. You strip away its power to shock you when it matters most. Take job interviews, a universal source of sweaty palms and racing hearts. Most candidates spend hours rehearsing perfect answers, but how many prepare for the awkward silence when they blank on a question? Or the sting of rejection. Negative visualization flips the script. Picture walking into that room and stumbling over your words. Imagine the interviewer's skeptical glance. Now ask yourself, what would I do next? Maybe you'd laugh it off and pivot. Maybe you'd ask for a moment to regroup. The moment you plan your response, the fear loses its fangs. This isn't pessimism, it's preparation. Ancient generals used this same strategy before battle, mapping out retreat routes and supply shortages. By confronting potential disasters in their minds, they could act decisively when chaos struck. The same applies to your daily battles. Visualizing a failed pitch doesn't make failure more likely. It equips you to recover gracefully. That's the hidden gift of premeditatio malorum. It replaces panic with problem solving. Seneca practiced this daily. He'd mentally rehearse losing his wealth, his status, even his family, not to wallow in misery, but to prove to himself that he could endure anything. Fate leads the willing, he wrote, and drags along the reluctant. When you willingly face your fears in advance, you're no longer at the mercy of circumstance. You become the one holding the reins, so try this today. Pick a challenge looming on your horizon, a tough conversation, a career risk, even a social event that makes you nervous. Close your eyes and play out the worst-case scenario in vivid detail. Then ask, how would I handle it? Notice how your shoulders relax when you realize you're not powerless. The fear of public speaking crumbles when you've already practiced recovering from a forgotten line. The dread of rejection fades when you've mentally rehearsed moving on to the next opportunity. Here's the twist most people miss. Negative visualization doesn't just prepare you for failure, it frees you to perform. Athletes use this technique all the time. A gymnast visualizes falling off the beam, then getting back up. That mental rehearsal doesn't make her fall. It lets her attempt harder moves with confidence, knowing she's ready for anything. The same applies to you. When you've already weathered the storm in your mind, you can walk into any room with a quiet certainty. Whatever happens, I've got this. So let's revisit that original question. How might visualizing setbacks actually empower you? The answer lies in the difference between reacting and responding. Most people react to setbacks with raw emotion, panic, shame, defeat. But when you've preemptively walked through those moments, you respond with clarity. You're not caught off guard, you're prepared, and that's the ultimate confidence booster, knowing that no matter what life throws at you, you've already practiced standing firm. Your inner voice is either your greatest ally or your harshest critic, and Stoicism teaches us that you get to choose which one it becomes. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming one of history's most revered philosophers, laid it bare. It's not what happens to you, but how you interpret it that matters. That interpretation, it starts with the words you whisper to yourself when no one's listening. Think about the last time you faced a challenge. Maybe your inner monologue sounded like this: I can't handle this. What if I fail? They'll think I'm not good enough. Now imagine replacing that script with Stoic clarity. This is within my power to handle. My worth isn't determined by outcomes. I choose to focus on what I can control. The situation hasn't changed, but your ability to meet it has transformed entirely. Here's the Stoic secret. Confidence isn't about eliminating doubt. It's about changing how you talk to yourself about doubt. Marcus Aurelius didn't journal about his insecurities to wallow in them. He wrote to reframe them. the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That shift from "this is too hard" to "this is how I grow" is the essence of Stoic self-talk. Let's break down how this works in practice. When you catch yourself thinking, "I'm not ready for this promotion," pause. Ask the Stoic question, is this truly beyond my abilities, or am I confusing discomfort with inadequacy? The first is a fact to address, the second is a judgment to discard. Epictetus warned us that suffering comes not from events, but from the judgments we attach to them. Change the judgment, and you change your entire experience. Negative self-talk thrives on absolutes: always, never, everyone, no one. Stoic affirmations, by contrast, are grounded in agency. I can, I choose, I will. Compare "I always mess up" presentations with "I'm improving" with each attempt. One keeps you trapped, the other propels you forward. The words you use internally don't just describe your reality, they create it. So here's your challenge today: carry a mental notebook. Every time you notice self-doubt creeping in, "I shouldn't speak up, I'll look foolish," interrupt it with a Stoic redirection: "My voice matters." Discomfort is part of growth. At first, it'll feel forced. That's normal. You're rewiring a lifetime of habitual thinking, but with repetition, something remarkable happens. The voice that once whispered "you can't" starts asking "how will you?" This isn't about empty positivity. Stoic affirmations are rooted in truth, not fantasy. When Seneca faced exile, he didn't pretend it was pleasant. He wrote, "This place may lack wealth, but it cannot lack the resource of a great mind." That's the balance. Acknowledge the challenge, then anchor yourself in what remains unshaken. Your turn. What's one recurring thought that undermines your confidence? Maybe it's "I don't belong here," or "I'll never be as good as them." Now craft a Stoic counterpoint: "I earned my place." My journey is mine alone. Write it down, say it aloud, wear it like armor, because the mind believes what it hears most often, and you're the one holding the microphone. Epictetus offered a timeless reminder: first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Your self-talk isn't just commentary, it's the blueprint. Start building wisely. Marcus Aurelius kept a private list of people he called his teachers, not just philosophers, but relatives, politicians, even rivals. In his journal, he meticulously recorded their strengths: his adoptive father's calm demeanor, his rhetoric instructor's patience, a senator's integrity under pressure. This wasn't hero worship. It was a deliberate practice the Stoics called prosody, the art of selective imitation. They understood something modern psychology confirms: we become who we surround ourselves with, even in our minds. Think about your own life. Whose confidence leaves you in awe? Maybe it's a colleague who negotiates with unshakable poise, or a historical figure like Eleanor Roosevelt, who redefined public speaking despite her fears. The Stoic approach isn't to envy these qualities, but to reverse engineer them. When Marcus admired his mentor Antoninus' ability to stay composed under stress, he didn't just praise it, he dissected it. What specific behaviors created that calm? How could he practice them himself? That's the difference between inspiration and implementation. Here's how to apply this today. Pick one person, living or historical, whose confidence resonates with you. Study them like a Stoic would. If it's Michelle Obama's grace under scrutiny, notice how she pauses before responding, or the way she grounds herself in purpose rather than applause. If it's an entrepreneur like Sarah Blakely, analyze how she reframes failures as data points. The goal isn't to mimic their personality, but to adopt the underlying principles they embody. History's greatest minds have used this technique. Benjamin Franklin famously kept a notebook tracking his progress, emulating virtues he admired in others. The Roman statesman Cato modeled his entire life on the legendary rigor of Sparta's leaders. What makes this so powerful is that it bypasses vague aspirations. Instead of, I want to be more confident, you're working with concrete examples. How would my mentor handle this meeting? What words would they use? But here's the crucial nuance Stoicism adds. Imitation isn't about losing yourself, it's about uncovering your potential. When Marcus wrote, "Take what's useful and move on," he meant cherry-picking traits that align with your values, not adopting someone else's identity. Maybe you admire Churchill's commanding speeches but reject his stubbornness. That's the Stoic way, discernment over blind allegiance. Try this exercise tonight. Jot down 3 people whose confidence you'd like to borrow in specific situations. A professor who commands a room, a grandparent who stood firm in their beliefs. Note not just what they do, but how they do it, their posture, their timing, their recovery from setbacks. Then, like Marcus reviewing his teachers each morning, revisit this list before facing your own challenges. The philosopher Musonius Rufus put it best: we rise to the level of those we study. Your environment shapes you whether you realize it or not, so why leave it to chance? Surround yourself, in life and in mind, with those who embody the unshakable confidence you seek, because the fastest way to become bold isn't just through practice, but through proximity to those who have already walked the path. Who's one person you've witnessed standing firm when everything was on the line? Not a flawless hero, but someone whose choices in moments of pressure left a mark on you. That's your Stoic mentor waiting to be discovered. Their lessons aren't in textbooks, they're in the way they lived. Your job is to listen, learn, and let their example light your way. Picture a musician stepping onto stage, fingers trembling as they adjust the microphone. In the crowd, some faces light up with anticipation while others scroll through phones, barely glancing up. Here's the Stoic truth Epictetus hammered home. In a concert, the musician's job isn't to control who applauds, it's to play each note with mastery. That's the essence of detachment from outcomes, not apathy, but a laser focus on what's yours to command, the effort, the preparation, the integrity you bring to your craft. The rest, it's not your burden to carry. Consider how differently 2 athletes approach the same game. One obsesses over stats, the roar of the crowd, whether scouts are watching. The other, they're locked into the rhythm of their breath, the precision of their form, the next play in front of them. The first athlete ties their worth to variables they can't control. The second finds freedom in perfecting what they can. That's the shift Stoicism offers, from craving external validation to deriving satisfaction from the work itself. Epictetus, born into slavery and denied even basic autonomy, distilled this into radical advice. Play your given role well, whether it's as a lame man, a beggar, or a king. Notice what he doesn't say: play your role only if the audience approves, because here's the paradox: when you stop needing applause to validate your effort, you perform with a confidence that often earns it anyway. Think about your own life, that project you poured your soul into, only to hear crickets afterward. The proposal you crafted meticulously, rejected without explanation. The Stoic question isn't why didn't they appreciate it, but did I do my part with excellence? When you anchor your worth in effort rather than outcomes, rejection loses its sting. A no becomes data, not a verdict on your value. Take the creative process: writing, painting, composing. The artist who chases trends or panders to algorithms might gain fleeting attention, but their work lacks the authenticity that resonates across time. Contrast that with creators like Vincent van Gogh, who sold barely a painting in his lifetime yet wrote, "I am seeking, I am striving, I am in it with all my heart." That's Stoic indifference in action, creating not for fame, but for the sacred act of creation itself. So here's the challenge. Next time you face a high-stakes moment, a pitch, a performance, a difficult conversation, ask yourself, what would change if I cared less about the result and more about showing up fully? Not as apathy, but as liberation. Imagine walking into that meeting thinking, my job isn't to control their decision, it's to present my case with clarity and conviction. That shift doesn't diminish your drive, it refines it. This is why Stoicism resonates with elite performers. From Navy SEAL to Olympic athletes, they train to focus on execution, not medals. A runner can't control who's faster on race day, but they can control every stride in training. When you adopt that mindset, pressure transforms. The presentation isn't about landing the client, it's about sharing ideas you believe in. The audition isn't about booking the role, it's about honoring the craft. Epictetus left us with a question that cuts to the core. If you're praised by others, do you ever stop to examine whether you deserve it? That's the litmus test. When you derive confidence from internal standards rather than external rewards, you become untouchable. Praise becomes a pleasant bonus, not a lifeline. Criticism becomes feedback, not a threat. So consider this. What's one area where you've been overvaluing outcomes? Maybe it's obsessing over social media likes instead of the quality of your posts, or stressing over quarterly reviews more than daily growth. Now picture approaching it like that Stoic musician playing each note with care, then letting the music find its own audience. That's where real confidence lies, not in guarantees, but in knowing you've done your part well, regardless of who's listening. Seneca described anger as brief insanity, a wildfire that burns brightest in the first moments before reason can intervene. But here's what most people miss. Between the spark of provocation and the blaze of reaction, there's a sliver of space. A Stoic pause, and in that silence lies the difference between being ruled by emotions and ruling over them. Picture this: your colleague takes credit for your idea in a meeting. Your pulse quickens, your jaw tightens, every instinct screams to call them out right then. But what if, instead of lashing out or shrinking back, you did nothing? Not forever, but for 10 deliberate seconds. Count them in your head, 1, 2, 3. With each number, you're not suppressing the feeling, you're creating distance from it. By 10, the heat subsides just enough for clarity to creep in. Now you can choose: address the slight with precision, or let it go as unworthy of your energy. That's the Stoic pause in action. Ancient Rome's streets were no less chaotic than our modern workplaces. Senators provoked each other, rivals spread rumors, and tempers flared. Seneca, advising his hot-headed brother, wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Not denial, not bottling it up, just delay, because anger, like a wave, loses power when it breaks against patience." Modern neuroscience confirms this. Those first seconds of emotional hijacking flood the body with cortisol, narrowing vision both literally and mentally. But wait just 90 seconds and the chemical surge begins to fade. The Stoics didn't have fMRI machines, but they understood the biology of calm through observation. Here's how to make this practical. Next time you feel that familiar rush of defensiveness, maybe when a loved one criticizes you, or a driver cuts you off, turn the pause into a ritual. Close your mouth, breathe into your belly, mentally recite a Stoic anchor phrase like "this isn't about me" or "I control my response." The goal isn't to eliminate emotion, it's to prevent emotion from eliminating your agency. History offers a masterclass in this. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus discovered his officers plotting against him, he didn't rant or retaliate. He called a meeting, then deliberately paused to adjust his sandal, a calculated delay that let him collect himself. What followed wasn't an outburst, but a strategic move that neutralized the threat while preserving his dignity. That's the power of the pause. It transforms reactions into responses. Try this reframe. Imagine your heated emotions as messengers knocking loudly at your door. The Stoic pause isn't about ignoring them. It's about choosing whether to invite them in for tea or send them away. Some deserve attention, righteous anger at injustice, for example. Others are just passing noise, but you'll only know the difference if you stop to ask. So here's your challenge. For the next week, wear an imaginary bracelet or set a phone reminder labeled pause. When tension rises, let it be your cue to step back mentally before stepping forward physically. Notice what changes. Maybe you'll catch yourself before snapping at a barista. Maybe you'll hear criticism as feedback instead of attack. Small pauses build like compound interest, each one strengthening your ability to respond, not react. Seneca warned that unchecked anger gives nothing back worth the price we pay. Every harsh word, every burned bridge, every moment of regret starts with skipping that vital pause. But here's the flip side. Every act of grace, every conflict navigated wisely, every ounce of respect earned begins with the courage to wait 10 seconds. The next time emotion demands an instant reaction, surprise it and yourself with silence. The space between stimulus and response is where your boldest confidence lies. Imagine standing face to face with someone who just interrupted you for the third time in a meeting. Your cheeks flush, your throat tightens. That familiar cocktail of frustration and hesitation bubbles up. Here's where most people either explode with anger or swallow their words. But Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, offered a third path. Speak truth with such kindness that it cannot be refused. That's the art of assertive communication, not dominance, not submission, but the quiet strength of clarity wrapped in respect. Let's break down how this works in real time. Say your coworker consistently dismisses your ideas. The passive response is silence. The aggressive response is a public takedown, the Stoic response. A private conversation framed like this. I've noticed our brainstorming sessions often move quickly past my contributions. I respect your expertise, and I'd appreciate the same consideration for mine. No accusations, no flattery, just facts delivered with what the Stoics called philostorgia, a blend of firmness and goodwill. Musonius was famous for this balance. When criticizing students, he'd first highlight their progress before addressing gaps. When debating rivals, he attacked ideas, never character. This wasn't weakness, it was strategic empathy. Because here's the paradox, kindness in delivery often makes truth harder to ignore. Think of Marcus Aurelius negotiating with rebellious generals. He didn't threaten, he listened, then stated his terms with unshakable calm. The message wasn't, I'll crush you, but we're better than this. Now let's role-play a tough conversation using Stoic principles. You're asking for a raise. Traditional advice says to list accomplishments and demand your worth. The Stoic approach starts differently, with premeditation. Before walking in, you'd visualize both outcomes, the raise granted and the request denied. Either way, you've already practiced maintaining your composure. Then, the actual dialogue. I've taken on additional responsibilities this year, like leading the X project and mentoring new hires. I'd like to discuss aligning my compensation with this scope. No ultimatums, no defensiveness, just clear, controlled communication that leaves room for dialogue. The key lies in what Musonius called the two anchors. Truth as your foundation, kindness as your compass. When a student asked how to handle insults, he didn't advise retaliation or avoidance. He said, answer as the physician answers the patient who reviles him, with a remedy for the disease, not anger at the symptoms. That shift, from taking offense to offering perspective, changes everything. Suddenly, the rude comment isn't a personal attack. It's a chance to model grace under fire. Here's where this transforms confidence. Most people tie assertiveness to winning, getting the raise, silencing the critic. Stoicism redefines success as staying true to your principles regardless of outcomes. Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a barrel, demonstrated this perfectly. When Alexander the Great asked what he could do for him, Diogenes simply said, "Step aside, you're blocking my sunlight." No groveling, no aggression, just unapologetic presence. That's the essence of Stoic communication, valuing your voice enough to let it stand on its own merit. So consider this: where in your life have you been holding back words that need saying? Maybe it's setting boundaries with a demanding friend, or correcting misinformation without sounding petty. Now imagine approaching that conversation with Musonius' twin anchors, truth and kindness, as your guide. Not to control the other person's reaction, but to honor your own integrity. Because when you stop fearing awkwardness more than dishonesty, you unlock a new caliber of confidence. The next time tension rises in a discussion, try this Stoic reset. Pause, ask yourself, what's the most truthful version of what I need to say? And how can I deliver it in a way that leaves dignity intact, both theirs and mine? That space between thought and speech is where boldness meets humanity, and it's in that balance that real influence is born. History remembers Thomas Edison's 10,000 attempts to invent the light bulb, but few recall what he actually said about them. "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That shift in perspective from seeing setbacks as dead ends to treating them as data is pure Stoicism in action. Centuries earlier, Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Two minds separated by millennia, united by one radical idea. What we call failure is often just the universe redirecting us toward a better path. Think of a river encountering a boulder. It doesn't weep or turn back. It simply finds a new route. That's the Stoic approach to obstacles. When your job application gets rejected, when a relationship ends, when a project flops, you're not facing failure. You're being handed a chisel to sculpt a wiser version of yourself. Modern psychology calls this post-traumatic growth. The Stoics called it Monday. Take Edison's story deeper. Most people focus on his persistence, but the real lesson lies in how he structured his experiments. Each failed attempt wasn't a verdict, it was a checklist item eliminated. Carbonized bamboo thread didn't work, cross it off. Platinum too expensive, next option. This systematic detachment, treating setbacks as neutral information rather than personal condemnation, is what the Stoics meant by amor fati, loving your fate, even when it wears the disguise of defeat. Marcus Aurelius faced this daily. Plague decimated Rome, barbarians threatened the borders, betrayal lurked in his own senate. Yet his meditations reveal a man who saw each crisis as raw material for virtue. The blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it, he wrote. That's the alchemy we've forgotten, the power to transform adversity into fuel. Here's how to practice this today. Pick a past failure that still stings, maybe a botched presentation or a rejected proposal. Now re-examine it through two Stoic questions. What did this teach me that success couldn't? And how did this prepare me for what's coming next? That missed promotion might have revealed gaps in your leadership skills. That failed business venture likely taught you more about cash flow than any MBA course. The Stoics didn't avoid pain, they mined it for wisdom. Consider the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold lacquer. The flaws aren't hidden, they're illuminated. Your setbacks are the gold seams in your character, the places where you've been broken and rebuilt with greater strength. Edison's light bulb wasn't the triumph of one final attempt, but the sum of all the failures that came before. So here's your challenge. This week, revisit an old defeat, not to relive the embarrassment, but to audit its hidden curriculum. What skills did it force you to develop? What assumptions did it shatter? What doors opened precisely because another one slammed shut? Write the answers like Marcus writing in his journal, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a student of experience. Because the difference between stumbling blocks and stepping stones isn't in the obstacle itself, it's in how you choose to place your foot. The next time you face rejection, hear Edison's voice. Results. Why I've gotten lots of results. I know several thousand things that won't work. That's not optimism, that's strategy, and it's available to you the moment you decide that setbacks aren't the opposite of success, they're its raw materials. There's a story about the ancient philosopher Diogenes, who walked through Athens carrying a lamp in broad daylight. When people asked what he was doing, he replied, "I'm looking for an honest man." But there's a deeper layer to this tale, one the Stoics understood well. Diogenes wasn't just making a point about hypocrisy, he was demonstrating what it means to live with urgency. That lamp, it was a metaphor for the fleeting nature of life itself. The Stoics called this memento mori, remembering that we're mortal, not to dwell on death, but to ignite how we live. Seneca put it bluntly, you act like mortals in all that you fear and like immortals in all that you desire. We delay bold moves, assuming there's always tomorrow. We tolerate mediocre relationships, stagnant jobs, unrealized dreams, as if time is infinite. But here's the paradox: accepting life's brevity doesn't shrink your world, it sharpens your focus. When you stop pretending you have forever, you start acting like today matters. Consider how differently two people approach the same week. One fills it with distractions, endless scrolling, petty grievances, tasks that won't matter in a month. The other, conscious of mortality, asks, if this were my last week, what would I prioritize? Not in a morbid way, but with clarity. That presentation they've been overthinking. They'd deliver it with conviction. The apology they've postponed, they'd speak it now. Memento mori isn't about fear. It's about liberation from trivialities. History's most impactful lives were often shaped by this awareness. Steve Jobs famously said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices." The Stoics would have nodded in agreement. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not for publication, but as private reminders to live fully amid the weight of empire. His journal is strewn with lines like, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say. So let's make this practical. Grab a coin and scratch 2 letters into it, MM. Carry it in your pocket. Every time you touch it, let it ask you, am I spending this hour, this conversation, this effort on what truly matters?" Notice how it changes small moments. That passive-aggressive email you were drafting, delete it. The creative project you've been saving for later, start today. Mortality isn't a threat, it's the ultimate accountability partner. Here's the twist most people miss. Memento mori doesn't just prioritize big life changes. It transforms mundane interactions. Imagine knowing this conversation with your child might be your last. Would you half listen while checking your phone? Or that meeting where you're afraid to voice an idea? What if silence became your only regret? Stoicism teaches us that death isn't waiting at the end. It's walking beside us, whispering, "Do it now." Seneca's letters hammer this home. He tells of a wealthy man who built lavish palaces but never enjoyed them, always saving pleasure for some distant future. He was arranging his life as if he had eternity. Seneca scoffs. Meanwhile, the philosopher himself, knowing his time was limited, wrote daily, debated passionately, and even in exile turned a barren island into a classroom. That's the power of memento mori. It turns someday into today. So here's your challenge. Tonight, as you lie in bed, ask yourself, what did I do today that would make tomorrow's eulogy meaningful? Not grand achievements, but moments of courage, kindness, or creation. Then picture your future self looking back on this exact moment. What will they wish you'd dared to do? The answer isn't morbid, it's the blueprint for a life without apologies. The Stoics didn't carry skulls to be grim, they carried them to be alive. That's the secret they want us to steal. Mortality isn't the enemy of confidence, it's the catalyst. When time feels scarce, hesitation falls away. You speak up because silence is too expensive. You take the leap because the ground was never permanent anyway. So tell me, what bold act have you been postponing that memento mori could unlock today? Ancient Stoic warriors didn't just train their minds, they trained their bodies to reflect unshakable resolve. Marcus Aurelius wrote about carrying himself like a Roman, even in private, knowing posture shapes perspective as much as perspective shapes posture. There's a reason statues of Stoic philosophers show them upright, shoulders back, gaze steady, not because they were immune to fear, but because they understood a fundamental truth. Confidence isn't just felt, it's physically performed. Modern science confirms what Zeno taught in the Stoa Poikile 2,000 years ago. When you stand with your feet firmly planted, your spine elongates and your chest opens. Your brain receives signals of stability and control. Harvard researchers found that adopting power poses for just 2 minutes increases testosterone, the dominance hormone, by 20%, while decreasing cortisol, the stress hormone, by 15%. The Stoics didn't have fMRI machines, but they knew this instinctively when Epictetus told his students to stand like a rock against which waves break. He was giving both a physical and mental prescription. Try this subtle shift today. Before entering a stressful situation, a difficult conversation, a high-stakes meeting, pause for 10 seconds outside the door. Roll your shoulders back as if drawing an invisible arrow across a bow. Feel your weight distribute evenly between both feet. Notice how this simple adjustment changes your breath, slowing it into deeper diaphragm pulls. The Stoics called this assuming the virtues you wish to embody. You're not pretending confidence, you're creating the physiological conditions for it to emerge. Consider the contrast between two speakers at a podium. One hunches over notes, arms crossed like a shield. The other stands grounded, hands relaxed at their sides. Even before speaking, the second commands attention not through arrogance, but through the quiet assurance of someone who's practiced presence. This was Cato the Younger's secret during Senate debates. Plutarch wrote that his rivals would sometimes concede arguments simply because his bearing made falsehood impossible. His posture wasn't performative, it was the outward expression of inner conviction. Here's where modern life betrays us. Hours slumped over phones and laptops train our bodies into submission literally. That forward head position, it triggers primal stress responses, making you feel perpetually defensive. The Stoic remedy is simple. Set hourly reminders to reset your posture. When the alert chimes, imagine a golden thread pulling your crown toward the ceiling while your shoulder blades slide down your back like stones settling into a riverbed. This isn't vanity, it's retraining your nervous system to default to calm authority. Musonius Rufus took this further, insisting his students practice speaking while holding heavy rocks at arm's length. The purpose, to teach them that clarity of thought depends on steadiness of body. You can try a modern version. Next time you rehearse an important talk, stand balancing a book on your head. Not to mimic aristocratic etiquette, but to cultivate the stillness that makes words land with weight. When your body stops fidgeting, your voice loses its tremors. The Stoics reserved their most profound posture lesson for times of crisis. Seneca described how facing adversity should mirror a tree in a storm, roots gripping the earth while the trunk bends just enough to avoid breaking. This isn't rigid resistance but resilient adaptation. Apply it next time you receive harsh feedback. Plant your feet firmly instead of shifting anxiously. Keep your hands visible rather than crossing them defensively. These micro-adjustments signal to others and yourself that you're secure enough to withstand the storm without uprooting. Notice what changes when you start carrying yourself like someone who belongs where they stand. Strangers meet your eyes longer, colleagues pause when you speak, but more importantly, your inner monologue shifts, that voice whispering, "Who do you think you are?" Quiets when your body broadcasts assurance. As Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, the soul takes on the color of its thoughts, and the body takes on the posture of its soul. Today, let your shoulders drop from your ears, your chin level with the floor. Not because you're fearless, but because you're practicing the physical grammar of courage, one deliberate stance at a time. Epictetus didn't just teach philosophy, he ran a drill camp for the mind. His students would practice poverty by wearing thin cloaks in winter, rehearse insults by having others mock them publicly, and simulate loss by intentionally breaking their favorite cups. This wasn't masochism. It was meditatio malorum, the Stoic art of pre-rehearsing challenges to strip them of their power. Modern psychology calls it stress inoculation. The principle is the same. Confidence isn't born from avoiding hardship, but from familiarizing yourself with it in advance. Think about the last time you walked into a job interview with shaky hands or blanked mid-presentation. Now imagine if you'd prepared like Epictetus trained his students, not just memorizing answers, but simulating the worst-case scenarios, the awkward silence after your response, the panel's skeptical frown, the question you dread. When you've already weathered these moments in your mind, they lose their ability to hijack your composure. The Stoics didn't wait for storms to learn navigation. They practiced in calm seas so they could steer through any squall. Here's how to apply this today. Before your next high-stakes moment, don't just visualize success, rehearse recovery. If it's a negotiation, role-play the other side saying no. If it's a speech, practice continuing smoothly after intentionally skipping a paragraph. Like a fire drill, this isn't about expecting disaster, it's about removing its novelty. Epictetus famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters." Preparation is the bridge between reaction and response. Consider how athletes use this. Basketball players shoot hundreds of free throws not just to perfect their form, but to ingrain muscle memory for clutch moments when the crowd's roaring. Similarly, Marcus Aurelius would begin each morning by mentally rehearsing the irritations he might face: rude people, interruptions, delays, and planning his calm countermoves. His journal reveals the payoff. When you wake up, tell yourself, "The people I meet today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, but I've seen the nature of these things before." That's the confidence of preparation, not the absence of challenges, but the certainty you've practiced meeting them. Try this exercise tonight. Take a situation causing you anxiety, a difficult conversation, an upcoming deadline, and write down 3 potential obstacles. Then script your exact response to each. How will you breathe when interrupted? What phrase will you use to buy thinking time? Like Seneca visualizing exile or Epictetus drilling discomfort, you're not predicting doom, you're building resilience. The Roman gladiators trained with wooden swords heavier than real ones so combat would feel effortless. Your mental rehearsals work the same way. Preparation does more than ease self-doubt. It rewires your relationship with uncertainty. The musician who's practiced recovering from a missed note plays with more freedom. The speaker who's rehearsed handling tough questions radiates ease. Epictetus drilled his students until hardship became routine because he knew this truth. The more familiar the obstacle, the less power it holds. Your turn now. What's one challenge you've been avoiding that meditatio could disarm? The answer might just be the key to walking into that room not hoping for the best but ready for anything. Epictetus cut straight to the heart of boundary setting with one razor-sharp question. If someone handed your body to a passerby, you'd be outraged. Why then do you hand over your mind? That's the Stoic no in its purest form, not harshness, but the quiet recognition that your time, energy, and attention are sacred. Imagine a Roman senator approached with yet another trivial request. He wouldn't rant or cower. He'd simply state his priorities with the steadiness of someone who knows their worth isn't tied to pleasing others. That same unshakable clarity is available to you today. Consider how often we betray our own boundaries, not from lack of courage, but from misguided virtue. I should be more accommodating, we tell ourselves. It's selfish to say no. Stoicism flips this script when Epictetus taught, it's better to die with integrity than live compromised. He wasn't advocating martyrdom. He was mapping the path to real influence. Think of Rosa Parks keeping her seat or Socrates refusing to flee his execution. Their power came not from defiance alone, but from the serene certainty that some lines cannot be crossed without losing oneself. Let's role-play a modern scenario. Your boss asks you to take on another project when you're already overwhelmed. The people-pleaser response is a strained yes followed by resentment. The aggressive version might be, that's not my job. The Stoic approach grounded honesty. I want to give this the focus it deserves, but with my current workload, I'd be doing both projects a disservice. Let's discuss priorities. No apology, no blame. Just truth spoken with what the ancients called eustatheia, the virtue of standing firm. Musonius Rufus trained his students to practice refusal like musicians practice scales. They'd rehearse turning down invitations, gifts, even flattery, not to be rude, but to strengthen their no muscles before stakes were high. You can do the same. Next time a telemarketer calls or a pushy salesperson approaches, use it as a training ground. No thank you isn't just an answer, it's a rehearsal for bigger boundaries. Notice how your pulse quickens at first, then steadies as you realize the world doesn't end when you honor your limits. History's most respected figures weren't those who said yes to everything, but those who guarded their no with wisdom. When the Roman general Cato was pressured to compromise his principles, he didn't argue, he walked away mid-conversation. His silence spoke louder than any rant. Your boundaries don't require justification either. That coworker who always dumps last-minute tasks on you, try. I can't take that on this time. No elaborate excuse. No guilt, just a gentle door closing, leaving space for what truly aligns with your purpose. So here's your challenge this week. Pick one area where you've been overextending. Maybe it's always being the family therapist or answering work emails at midnight. Now craft your Stoic no, not as a wall, but as a gate. I care about you, but I can't hold this conversation right now. Or after 6 p.m., I focus on recharging for tomorrow, then watch something extraordinary happen. At first, people may test the new boundary, but soon, like sunlight shifting to respect a mountain's shadow, they'll adjust. And you'll discover what Seneca knew. When you stop scattering your energy, you become a force no one can ignore. Where will your first unshakable no plant itself this week? Not in anger, not in fear, but in the quiet certainty that some things are too precious to give away. Seneca's letters reveal a startling truth. The man who advised emperors and shaped Rome's greatest minds considered solitude his highest luxury. Be a friend to yourself, he wrote, and you'll never be alone. That's Stoic solitude in its purest form, not loneliness, but communion with the one person whose approval truly matters, your unfiltered self. Picture this, it's the 1st century, and while Rome's elite scramble for invitations to decadent parties, Seneca retreats to his modest villa. No scrolls, no servants, just the quiet cultivation of what he called his inner citadel. That's where real confidence is forged, not in applause, but in the unshaken knowledge that you're enough, even when the room empties. Modern life treats solitude like a disease to be cured. We drown silence in podcasts, numb reflection with notifications, and mistake constant connection for fulfillment. But here's what the Stoics understood. If you can't bear your own company, why would anyone else? Think of the last time you sat alone at a cafe without reaching for your phone. The fidgeting, the urge to appear occupied, that's not just habit. It's the primal fear that without external validation, we might discover we're less substantial than we pretend. Seneca confronted this head-on. Until you've made peace with who you are, you'll always be envious of others. History's most centered leaders shared this practice. Marcus Aurelius would rise before dawn to write in his journal, not for publication, but to converse with his principles. Cato the Younger, known for his unbreakable will, spent evenings in his garden deliberating, no advisors, no audience. These weren't antisocial acts, they were rehearsals for integrity. When you've faced your own depths, others' opinions lose their chokehold. That's the alchemy of solitude. It transforms isolation into self-possession. Try this experiment tonight. Power down your devices for 30 minutes, not to meditate or optimize yourself, but to simply exist without agenda. Notice how discomfort arises. Your mind will race for distractions like a caged animal. That's the moment Seneca would recognize, the crossroads where most turn back but the Stoic pushes forward. Sit with the restlessness until it settles. Ask yourself the questions we've been too busy to hear. Who am I when no one's watching? What truths have I buried under busyness? Here's the paradox solitude reveals. The more comfortable you become alone, the more authentically you connect with others. Like a tree drawing strength from roots hidden underground, your public confidence grows deepest in private reflection. Musonius Rufus taught that true friendship begins with self-friendship. You can't offer others what you haven't cultivated within. So here's your challenge. This week, schedule an appointment with yourself, not in the shower or during your commute, but in a chair with nothing but your thoughts. Start with 10 minutes. No music, no podcasts, just you and the quiet. At first, it'll feel like staring at a blank canvas. But soon, you'll start tracing patterns you've ignored for years, the unresolved tensions, the quiet joys, the core values obscured by daily noise. That blankness isn't emptiness, it's the mirror Stoics used to meet their truest selves. Seneca described solitude as the school of genius, not because isolation creates brilliance, but because it strips away the performances we mistake for identity. When you stop rehearsing for an audience of others, you finally hear the voice that matters, the one that's been waiting to remind you who you are and what you stand for. That's where confidence begins, not in the crowd's roar, but in the silence where you remember your own name. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, began his mornings with a ritual that would baffle most modern leaders. Before donning his imperial robes, he'd sit with his journal and write lines like, "Today I'll meet interfering, ungrateful people, but I can learn from them all." That's the paradox of Stoic confidence. It's not built on towering above others, but on the willingness to kneel beside them and listen. The emperor who could command armies understood something we often forget. True strength isn't threatened by humility. It's refined by it. Consider the legendary general Scipio Africanus, who defeated Rome's greatest enemy, Hannibal. After his victory, senators expected a triumphal parade. Instead, Scipio did something astonishing. He sailed to Sicily and spent weeks interviewing the very merchants and farmers his troops had fought against. He wanted to understand Carthaginian culture, their tactics, even their mistakes. When critics accused him of wasting time, his reply echoed Stoic principles. The man who thinks he has nothing left to learn has already lost. That's humility in action, not weakness, but the confidence to acknowledge that wisdom hides in unexpected places. Here's where modern hustle culture gets it wrong. We're taught to fake it till you make it, to project infallibility, but the Stoics knew better. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, taught his students to approach every interaction as if their sandals held hidden messages only others could reveal. Imagine walking into your next team meeting with that mindset. Instead of mentally rehearsing your own points, you're genuinely curious. What can the intern's fresh perspective teach me? How might the quietest person in the room see what I've missed? That's not passive behavior, it's active wisdom gathering. History's most respected leaders shared this trait. When Abraham Lincoln formed his cabinet, he intentionally appointed rivals men who'd openly criticized him. One, Edwin Stanton, had once called him a long-armed ape. Yet Lincoln made him Secretary of War, later saying, "We need the strongest men, even if they don't always agree with me." That's the humility-confidence balance in practice. Lincoln's self-assurance wasn't brittle. It was expansive enough to hold opposing views without crumbling. So how does humility actually strengthen confidence? Think of a tree. The deeper its roots grow into the earth hidden from view, the taller it can stand against the wind. Your willingness to learn from the intern, to admit when you're wrong, to seek feedback before decisions, those are your roots. They don't make you smaller, they anchor you so firmly that no storm of doubt or competition can topple you. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, "If someone can prove me wrong, I'll gladly change." What I seek is truth, not victory. Try this reframe today. The next time someone corrects you, resist the knee-jerk defense. Instead, hear their words as Seneca heard his critics. "They're giving me free mirrors to see my blind spots." That subtle shift transforms humility from a concession into a superpower. Because here's the secret the Stoics guarded closely. The people who listen with genuine openness aren't perceived as weak. They're remembered as the ones who never stopped growing, and that's the most unshakable confidence of all. Now consider this. Who in your life have you dismissed as having nothing to teach you? The barrister who remembers everyone's orders might model presence. The colleague who handles rejection gracefully could demonstrate resilience. Even the person who irritates you, what if their flaws are highlighting areas you've neglected in yourself? True confidence doesn't need to announce itself. Like Marcus' morning ritual, it whispers, "However high I rise, the ground will always have lessons to offer." Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught that virtue isn't conquered in a single heroic leap. It's built step by step, like a mason laying bricks. He famously illustrated this by holding his hand flat to show the open palm of doubt, then slowly closing his fingers one by one into the fist of conviction. That's the hidden power of small wins. They transform uncertainty into momentum. Think of how a ship adjusts its course by degrees. Each minor correction seems insignificant in isolation, but collectively, they determine whether you reach the harbor or drift aimlessly. Modern psychology confirms what Zeno knew intuitively. When researchers tracked progress toward personal goals, they found something fascinating. People who celebrated tiny daily achievements were 3 times more likely to sustain motivation than those fixated on distant milestones. The Stoics didn't wait for grand victories to affirm their progress. Marcus Aurelius recorded nightly reflections not on his imperial triumphs, but on moments like holding his temper during a frustrating meeting or choosing patience with a slow servant. These weren't trivial nothings, they were the raw materials of an unshakable character. Consider the athlete training for the Olympics. Gold medals aren't won in a day. They're earned through thousands of laps where the only witness is the clock. Each stroke, each stride, each silent morning when the bed feels warmer than the track, these are the uncelebrated victories that forge champions. The Stoic approach mirrors this. Confidence grows in the soil of repetition, not the fireworks of occasional brilliance. Epictetus put it plainly, if you want to be a philosopher, first prove you can keep your cup clean. Mastery begins with mundane acts. Here's where we often go wrong. We dismiss the small stuff, showing up on time, resisting a petty complaint, finishing a single page of writing, as too insignificant to matter. But Musonius Rufus warned against this blindness. He who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. Your ability to handle life's storms isn't forged during the storm itself, but in all the quiet moments you spent preparing. Like a tree growing rings invisible to the eye, strength accumulates in layers. Try this Stoic exercise tonight. Grab a notebook or even a scrap of paper and list 3 small wins from today that you'd normally overlook. Maybe you paused before reacting to a rude email. Maybe you took the stairs instead of the elevator. Maybe you simply showed up when you felt like quitting. Write them down without judgment. Then ask yourself, what does this say about who I'm becoming? Because here's the secret Zeno uncovered. Virtue isn't a destination you reach, it's the sum of every tiny choice that aligns with your principles. History's most resilient figures understood this rhythm. Thomas Edison didn't just wake up one day and invent the light bulb. He logged thousands of failures that he reframed as discoveries. Beethoven composed symphonies one note at a time as his hearing faded. Their confidence didn't come from ignoring the grind, it came from honoring it. That's the Stoic mindset, treating each modest effort as a brick in the foundation of your character. So here's your challenge. For the next week, end each day by naming 3 micro-victories, not with false cheer, but with the quiet respect a gardener shows seedlings. Because the irony is this, the more you honor small wins, the less you'll need validation from grand ones. Confidence stops being something you chase and becomes something you've already earned, one deliberate step at a time. Epictetus, born a slave and crippled by a cruel master, could have spent his life cursing his fate. Instead, he taught a radical idea. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. That's the secret thread connecting gratitude to unshakable confidence, not the shallow kind that depends on circumstances, but the deep-rooted assurance that comes from knowing your inherent worth. Picture 2 warriors preparing for battle. One obsesses over the sword he lacks, the other tests the edge of the blade in his hand. Both face the same fight, but only one stands with steady feet. Stoic gratitude isn't about passive acceptance, it's active recognition. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive," he wasn't offering platitudes. He was training his mind to see resources where others saw lack. Think of a time you felt insecure in a meeting. Maybe you focused on the colleague with fancier credentials while overlooking your own hard-won experience. That's the moment gratitude becomes armor. By consciously inventorying your strengths not as boastful trophies, but as tools ready for use, you shift from comparing yourself to others to equipping yourself for action. Here's how to put this into practice tonight. Grab a notebook and divide the page into 3 columns. In the first, list skills you've honed through effort, perhaps your ability to explain complex ideas simply, or your knack for calming tense situations. In the second, note challenges you've already overcome, big or small. That time you salvaged a project gone awry, or navigated a difficult conversation without retreating. The third column, current advantages you might be taking for granted, a mentor's guidance, a body that carries you through each day. even the quiet corner where you can think uninterrupted. This isn't vanity, it's strategic awareness. Like a general surveying his provisions before battle, you're mapping your reserves so doubt can't pretend you're unarmed. The magic lies in the reframe. Gratitude doesn't ignore gaps, it prevents them from eclipsing your assets. Consider how athletes use this mindset. A runner with a sprained ankle doesn't fixate on the injury. She focuses on the conditioning she's built over years, the precision of her stride, the mental toughness she can summon. Epictetus would nod in recognition. His teachings constantly circled back to this truth. Confidence crumbles when we anchor it to what we lack, but becomes unassailable when rooted in what we've already proven we possess. So here's the question to sit with tonight. How might your self-perception shift if you measured yourself not by the distance left to travel, but by the ground you've already claimed? Not as complacency, but as fuel. The musician grateful for calloused fingers knows they've earned their craft. The writer thankful for rejection letters sees them as proof of courage. Even in chains, Epictetus found freedom in this realization that no one could take his ability to choose his perspective. Your turn now. What strengths have you been overlooking that, if fully acknowledged, could change how you walk into tomorrow's challenges? This practice isn't about crafting a rosy illusion. It's about correcting a cognitive bias, our tendency to notice empty spaces while ignoring solid ground. The Stoics called this the discipline of ascent, consciously choosing where to place your attention. When you train yourself to spot foundations rather than fissures, you don't just feel more confident. You become objectively more resilient, because gratitude, in the end, is just another word for preparedness, the quiet certainty that whatever comes, you're starting from a position of strength, not scarcity. Tonight, as you light a candle or switch off the lamp, try this final exercise. Name one thing about yourself that makes you proud, not the polished version you show the world, but the quiet victory only you fully understand. Maybe it's the patience you've learned after years of impulsiveness, or the way you still dream despite past disappointments. That's your Stoic gratitude in action, not a shield against reality, but a lens that lets you see yourself clearly, wholly, and without apology. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about the river of life, how its currents pull us toward unknown shores, yet beneath the surface runs an invisible order, a guiding intelligence the Stoics called logos. He described it as the thread that connects all things, the universal reason that turns chaos into meaning. This isn't some abstract philosophy, it's the bedrock of unshakable confidence. Because when you stop seeing yourself as a leaf tossed by the wind and start recognizing the purpose woven into your very being, hesitation falls away. The emperor put it bluntly in his journal, "Let your actions be guided by what's useful to the whole and aligned with your own nature." That's the secret. Confidence isn't found in certainty, but in congruence, the deep knowing that you're moving with the current of your truest self. Think of two climbers scaling a cliff. One obsesses over every handhold, paralyzed by the fear of falling. The other feels the rock's texture, senses the rhythm of their breath, and moves with a quiet trust in their training. The difference isn't skill, it's surrender to the logic of the climb itself. That's logos in action. The Stoics believed every person, like every river or star, has a natural course to follow. Your version might be creating art that stirs souls, building systems that simplify lives, or simply showing up with relentless kindness in a world that needs it. The moment you stop resisting that pull is the moment you stop apologizing for taking up space. Here's how to uncover yours. Grab a pen and finish this sentence. I feel most alive when, not what looks impressive on LinkedIn, not what your parents praised, but the activity that makes time dissolve. For Marcus, it was writing philosophy amid the roar of war camps. For Epictetus, it was teaching students to find freedom within chains. Your answer might be crafting meals that nourish friends, solving complex equations, or listening so deeply people feel seen. That's your logos whispering. Now ask, what problem breaks my heart to see unsolved? The gap between these answers, your joy and your grief, is where purpose lives. History's boldest figures weren't fearless. They were fueled by something bigger than fear. When the Stoic philosopher Cato stood alone against Julius Caesar's tyranny, it wasn't bravado that kept him firm. It was the certainty that his defiance, even in defeat, was part of a larger fabric of justice. NASA engineer Katherine Johnson calculated trajectories for Apollo missions while facing segregation, later saying, "I was just doing my part in the story." That's the confidence logos provides, not the absence of doubt, but the presence of a why that outweighs it. Try this reframe today. Next time you hesitate before sending that proposal, asserting a boundary, or sharing an unconventional idea, ask not, will this succeed? But does this align? Success is fickle, alignment is timeless. The artist who paints for gallery sales second guesses every stroke. The one who paints because her soul demands it. She might face rejection, but never irrelevance. So here's the question to carry with you. What purpose would make your hands steady in the face of any storm? Not a grand title or a bank balance, but the quiet knowing that whatever comes, you're living in agreement with something older and wiser than fleeting applause. The Stoics didn't promise calm seas, just the compass to navigate them. Your logos is that needle, always pointing true north. All you have to do is follow. Seneca wrote letters from a bathtub as the walls shook, not from an earthquake, but from Emperor Nero's soldiers storming his home. The philosopher who'd spent years teaching serenity now faced his ultimate test, death by his former student's command. Yet his final act wasn't panic or pleading. He called for scribes to record his thoughts, then turned to his weeping wife and said, "Why weep for me? You've known my soul was unconquerable." That's the Stoic smile, not the absence of pain, but the presence of something stronger. History brims with moments where grace under pressure changed everything. Picture the Apollo 13 mission, oxygen tanks exploding 200,000 miles from Earth. While the world held its breath, astronaut Jack Swigert radioed Houston with flawless calm. "Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here." No raised voice, no wasted energy, just pure focus on solutions, the modern echo of Seneca's unshaken demeanor. Both men understood a truth we often forget. Chaos doesn't require matching energy. In fact, the quieter you become, the more clearly you can steer. Here's where most of us go wrong. We think facing challenges means mustering equal intensity, shouting back when provoked, rushing when deadlines loom. But the Stoics practiced inverse physics. The heavier the pressure, the lighter they stepped. Like a martial artist using an opponent's momentum against them, they met force with poise. When protesters hurled insults at Cato the Younger, he'd pause, then thank them for revealing their character so plainly. His smile wasn't mockery, it was mastery. Try this reframe today. That coworker who snaps at you in meetings, instead of mirroring their tension, channel Seneca in his bath. Take a slow breath so deep it surprises even you, then respond at half their volume. Watch how discomfort shifts, the driver cutting you off. Experiment with Musonius Rufus' tactic. Whisper a blessing instead of a curse. May they arrive safely. These aren't acts of surrender, they're subtle rebellions against reactivity. The Stoic smile isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about reclaiming the space between stimulus and response. Buddhist monks have a similar practice. When startled, they deliberately slow their movements to rewire panic into presence. You can cultivate this too. Next time your phone pings with bad news, resist the urge to react immediately. Stand up, stretch toward the ceiling like Marcus Aurelius straightening his imperial robes. Then and only then address the situation. That 10-second buffer is where your power lies. Consider how nature operates. A hurricane shreds everything: rigid roofs, signs, fences, while bamboo bends low and rises unharmed. Your composure works the same way. The project manager who stays calm during a system crash doesn't do it by ignoring the problem. They do it by bending toward solutions without breaking posture. Seneca called this the art of sailing with adverse winds, adjusting your sails rather than raging against the storm. So here's your challenge before we part ways. Today, pick one minor stressor: a long line, a delayed train, a spilled coffee, and treat it as your training ground. When irritation rises, press your tongue gently to the roof of your mouth, an ancient Stoic trick to pause reflexive reactions. Then ask, what would serenity look like here? Not indifference, but engaged calm. The barrister apologizes for the wait. Respond with eye contact and no rush instead of a distracted nod. The elevator stops unexpectedly. Use the stillness to notice your breath. These are the reps that build unshakable poise. Seneca's last words weren't recorded, but his life's message echoes clearly. The world will hand you chaos daily. Your job isn't to stop the storm, it's to prove the storm can't stop you. So smile, not because life is easy, but because you're built for whatever isn't. And remember, the calmer you stand, the farther your resolve will travel. Heraclitus stood by the same river twice, or so he claimed, yet its waters were never the same. Marcus Aurelius echoed this truth centuries later in his Meditations. The universe is change, life is understanding. That simple observation holds the key to confidence amid upheaval, not by resisting the current, but by learning to swim with purpose. Consider the tech executive who spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder, only to watch AI transform her industry overnight. She could have clung to the wreckage of her old role. Instead, she applied Stoic acceptance, not resignation, and retrained as an ethical AI consultant. What looked like an ending became her most impactful chapter. Change terrifies us not because it's inherently threatening, but because we mistake stability for safety. The Stoics saw this illusion clearly. When Seneca's wealth was confiscated, he wrote to a friend, "I've lost everything except what mattered." His words reveal the hidden gift of impermanence. It strips away the non-essential, leaving only what we truly value. Think of a tree in autumn. The leaves it releases aren't failures, they make room for new growth. Your career pivots, relationship shifts, even unexpected losses work the same way. They're not disruptions to your path, they're invitations to walk a braver one. Modern psychology confirms what the ancients practiced. Researchers studying major life transitions found that people who frame change as evolution rather than threat report higher resilience and creativity. It's the difference between white-knuckling a rocking boat and adjusting your stance to ride the waves. Marcus Aurelius modeled this during the Antonine Plague, when Rome lost a third of its population. Instead of despairing over what he couldn't control, he focused on reforming sanitation systems and supporting bereaved families. His journal reflects this mindset. The obstacle becomes the way when you stop calling it an obstacle. Here's how to apply this today. That industry shift making your skills feel obsolete. Treat it like a Stoic training ground. First, distinguish between core principles that transcend time problem solving, adaptability, and tools that are meant to evolve specific software, outdated methods. Then design a learning sprint. Dedicate 30 minutes daily to mastering one relevant new skill, not as a panic move, but as a deliberate alignment with Heraclitus River. History's most adaptable minds, from Da Vinci pivoting between art and engineering to Angela Merkel transitioning from physicist to chancellor, shared this trait. They didn't resist redirection, they anticipated it. So let's pause here. What change have you been privately dreading? A reorganization at work, a child leaving home, even your body aging. Now imagine applying Marcus Aurelius' lens. This isn't happening to you. It's happening for your evolution. The project cancellation creates space for innovation. The empty nest unlocks time for neglected passions. The wrinkles map a life richly lived. Confidence in flux doesn't mean faking optimism. It means trusting your ability to find footholds where others see only cliffs. The Japanese art of kintsugi offers a beautiful parallel. When a ceramic piece breaks, artisans repair it with gold lacquer, not to hide the cracks, but to highlight them as part of the object's history. Your transitions deserve the same reverence. That career setback, it's gold dust in your story. The relationship that reshaped you, those are the veins of precious metal making your character stronger at the broken places. Now consider this. What change are you resisting that could actually free you? The side hustle you delay because it's not practical. The difficult conversation you avoid because it might rock the boat. What if these were Heraclitus waters inviting you to step in anew? Write down one shift you've been fearing. Then beside it, draft a single small action to engage with it this week, not to control it, but to converse with it. Because the secret the Stoics guarded isn't that change stops being hard. It's that you become someone for whom hardness stops mattering. Marcus left us with a final reminder. Soon you'll be ashes or bones. A mere name at most, even the name is just sound and echo. Morbid, only if you miss the point. Impermanence isn't a threat, it's permission. Permission to pivot boldly, love fiercely, and speak authentically while time remains. The river keeps flowing. Will you stand frozen on the bank or wade in with both feet? The choice, as always, is yours. Epictetus handed his students a brutal yet liberating truth. If someone tried to take your body and hand it to a passerby, you'd fight back. Why then do you hand over your mind? That question cuts to the core of Stoic detachment, not indifference, but the deliberate choice of what deserves your mental real estate. Picture this ancient scene. A philosopher walks through Athens' bustling agora as whispers trail behind him. He's a fraud. His teachings are nonsense. Instead of spinning around to engage, he adjusts his cloak and keeps walking, as undisturbed as a mountain ignoring the weather. That's confidence in its purest form, the quiet understanding that not all battles are worth your presence. Modern life bombards us with opinions masquerading as truth, social media algorithms feeding outrage, co-workers dissecting your choices in hushed tones, even well-meaning relatives questioning your path. The Stoic approach: treat them like background noise in a crowded cafe. You acknowledge it exists, but you don't lean in to catch every word. Epictetus in Kyridion offers a practical drill. When criticized unfairly, ask yourself two questions: is this within my control? And does this person's judgment reflect reality or their own biases? If your answer is no to either, their words belong to them, not you. Let's role-play this. Imagine your colleague mutters that you only got the promotion because you're a people-pleaser. Your instinct might be to confront them or, worse, internalize the jab. Now apply the Stoic pause. First, examine the source. Is this someone whose professional acumen you respect? Next, assess the content. Does their comment hold actionable truth, or is it just emotional debris? If it's the latter, picture their words as leaves floating past on a river. You wouldn't jump in to retrieve dead foliage. Don't chase meaningless criticism either. History's most centered figures mastered this art. When Michelangelo was accused of wasting funds on the Sistine Chapel's lavish designs, he didn't pen defensive manifestos. He mixed his paints and kept climbing the scaffold, knowing the ceiling would answer for itself. Eleanor Roosevelt, battered by vicious press during FDR's presidency, kept a journal where she reframed attacks as reminders. You wouldn't worry so much about what others think of you if you realized how seldom they do. That's the secret. Most critics are too preoccupied with their own performances to scrutinize yours as closely as you fear. Here's the practice that changes everything. List 3 people whose opinions currently weigh on you: a boss, a social media influencer, maybe a parent. Now annotate each name with what Stoics called prosoch, a mindful examination. Ask, what expertise does this person actually have in my domain? How does their judgment serve or hinder my purpose? You might realize your anxiety stems from valuing the input of someone whose values you don't even share. Like Marcus Aurelius reviewing his mentors each morning, this isn't about dismissing all feedback, it's about curating your advisory board with the discernment of a museum director selecting masterpieces. Detachment isn't apathy, it's the ultimate act of self-defense. Think of a seasoned chef who receives a complaint that her signature dish is too spicy. She doesn't remake the recipe for one palate, she trusts her training and knows her audience. Your life's work deserves the same respect. When you stop over-indexing on opinions that don't nourish your growth, you free up energy to cultivate what truly matters: your own standards, your quiet progress, the work that outlasts the noise. So here's your challenge today. Carry a small stone in your pocket, a physical reminder of Epictetus' lesson. Every time you catch yourself overreacting to someone's offhand remark, grip it and ask, is this feedback or fallout? If it's the former, mine it for gold. If it's the latter, let it sink like the stone it is. Because confidence isn't about being universally understood, it's about being unshakably anchored in your own worth, regardless of who tosses pebbles into your waters. Dawn breaks over Rome, the first streaks of light barely touching the marble columns as Marcus Aurelius dips his pen into ink. His private journal lies open, not to record imperial decrees, but to wrestle with human frailty. When you arise in the morning, he writes, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. This wasn't poetic musing, it was the emperor's daily armor against chaos. His morning ritual, equal parts gratitude and grit, forged the mindset that would steer an empire through plague and war. And here's what most miss: you don't need a throne to borrow his strategy. Start with the Stoic pause, a practice as simple as it is transformative. Before reaching for your phone, before the day's demands flood in, sit upright on the edge of your bed. Feel the weight of your body, the rhythm of your breath. For 60 seconds, anchor yourself in what Epictetus called the here and now, where all power resides. This isn't passive meditation, it's active orientation, like a ship's captain taking bearings before leaving port. Modern neuroscience backs this ancient wisdom. Those first conscious moments upon waking set your brain's emotional tone for hours. The Stoics knew it instinctively. How you begin determines how you proceed. Now reach for your journal, not to chronicle events, but to converse with your highest self. Marcus didn't scribble to-do lists. He worked through 3 questions that cut through self-deception. What virtue will I strengthen today? What challenge might test me? How will I meet it with integrity? Try this modern adaptation. First, name one quality to cultivate, perhaps patience during a tedious meeting or courage to voice an unpopular opinion. Next, anticipate one friction point where that virtue might be needed: a difficult coworker, a procrastination trigger. Finally, script your response. When X happens, I will do Y. This isn't wishful thinking, it's mental rehearsal. Navy SEAL use similar techniques before missions, visualizing obstacles and their responses until reactions become reflexes. The next element, negative visualization, a practice that sounds morbid but unlocks extraordinary freedom. Spend 2 minutes imagining the loss of comforts you take for granted, your health, your home, even your dearest relationships. Seneca did this daily, explaining, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." This isn't pessimism, it's emotional inoculation. When you mentally walk through worst-case scenarios, losing your job, facing criticism, you strip them of their power to shock. Researchers studying anxiety disorders found that participants who practiced this Stoic technique for just 5 mornings reduced avoidance behaviors by 40%. Now stand like a Stoic literally. Adopt what the ancients called the philosopher's posture, feet shoulder-width apart, shoulders rolled back, chin parallel to the floor. Hold this stance while reciting a single affirmation. Marcus whispered to himself, "I carry the torch of my own reason." Feel how your body language shapes your inner dialogue. Harvard studies confirm that maintaining this posture for 2 minutes increases dominance hormones while lowering stress chemicals. The Stoics didn't need labs to prove it. They knew confidence starts in the bones before it reaches the brain. Here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, dedicate 15 morning minutes to this ritual. Not when it's convenient, not when you feel inspired, especially when you don't. Track the shifts. Maybe you'll catch yourself breathing through a provocation that once would have triggered you. Perhaps you'll notice a steadiness in your voice during a high-stakes conversation. Like Marcus polishing his character dawn after dawn, you're not chasing perfection, you're proving progress. The true test comes on day 8, when the alarm rings and no one's watching. Will you reach for distraction or for the pen? Because Stoicism was never about grand gestures. It was about the 1,000 tiny choices that sculpt an unshakable core. The emperor left us a clue in his final journal entry. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Your mornings are the dye vat. What hue will you choose today? Seneca sat at his desk in the fading light of a Roman evening, penning words that would outlive emperors. Life is long if you know how to use it. Not length of years, but depth of moments. That was his measure of a life well lived. The Stoics didn't chase fame or monuments. They built their legacies in the quiet corners of daily choices. Picture a stone dropped into still waters. The ripples spread far beyond the initial splash. Your boldest actions might not etch your name in marble, but they will echo in the lives you touch. That's the confidence legacy provides, not the brittle kind that depends on applause, but the unshakable certainty that your existence mattered on its own terms. History remembers Marcus Aurelius not for his military conquests, but for the private journal he never intended to publish, a manual of integrity that still guides millions. Epictetus, the former slave, left no grand buildings, only conversations recorded by a student that would dismantle mental slavery for centuries. Their legacies weren't crafted in grand gestures, but in the steadfast commitment to live by principle, even especially when no one was watching. Consider the modern equivalent. The teacher who stays late to help a struggling student won't make headlines, but 20 years later, that student might credit them for changing their trajectory. Legacy isn't left in hindsight, it's built in the present tense. Here's the question that sharpens focus like nothing else. When your name is spoken decades from now, what do you hope it calls to mind? Not the titles you held or the wealth you accumulated, but the qualities you embodied. The Stoics called this living your eulogy. Seneca urged his followers to act as if the world were watching, even when alone, because character revealed in private inevitably shapes public impact. Think of the nurse whose gentle hands comforted thousands, or the entrepreneur who prioritized ethics over easy profits. Their confidence didn't come from external validation. It flowed from knowing their actions aligned with something timeless. Legacy thrives on boldness tempered by virtue. When Rosa Parks refused to surrender her bus seat, she wasn't thinking about history books, she was honoring a quiet conviction that had simmered for years. The Stoics would recognize her courage as Andrea, not reckless daring, but moral bravery. Your version might be smaller in scale, but no less significant, advocating for a marginalized colleague, creating art that challenges norms, or simply being the person who radiates calm in chaos. These are the threads that weave a life worth remembering. So let's make this practical. Grab a sheet of paper and divide it into 2 columns. On the left, list the roles you currently fill: parent, professional, friend. On the right, describe how you'd like each role remembered. Not successful executive, but the one who lifted others as they climbed. Then circle one discrepancy between current reality and desired legacy. That gap, it's your compass pointing toward necessary boldness. Perhaps it means having that long overdue conversation about values with your team, or finally starting the project that scares you because it matters more than your ego. Seneca's letters return to this theme like a drumbeat. We suffer more in imagination than reality. The steps toward your legacy often seem larger in dread than in doing. The teacher afraid to publish her lesson plans online, fearing criticism, only to discover they help educators worldwide. The shy accountant who volunteers to mentor newcomers, realizing his quiet expertise can shape careers. Legacy isn't about scale, it's about sincerity. Tonight, as you turn off the lights, ask Seneca's defining question: what will I regret not having dared? Not for fame, not for glory, but because the world needed someone to stand for that particular truth, and you were here. That's how ordinary people build extraordinary legacies, one unspectacular, indispensable act of courage at a time. The Stoics knew this secret: your boldest self isn't waiting for permission. It's waiting for you to remember how briefly, how brightly you get to burn. Epictetus forced his students to confront a brutal truth: the things we dread most are often prisons we've built in our minds. His infamous "what if" drills weren't about pessimism, they were liberation through imagination. Picture this: a merchant in ancient Rome trembles at the thought of losing his fortune. Epictetus would make him write out the scenario in agonizing detail: homelessness, hunger, ridicule, then ask, now what? The exercise revealed something startling. Even in ruin, the merchant still controlled his values, his choices, his dignity. That's the Stoic worst-case drill: not to dwell on disaster, but to prove you're stronger than your fears. Let's apply this to financial anxiety, a modern plague. Close your eyes and visualize your bank account hitting zero, the repo men taking your car, the humiliating calls to relatives for loans. Feel the knot in your stomach. Good. Now go deeper. What skills would you rely on to rebuild? Maybe you'd tutor online, barter handyman services, or cook meals from cheap staples. Notice how your mind starts problem solving once panic subsides. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do." By rehearsing disaster, you strip it of its power to paralyze. History's greatest comebacks were forged this way. After losing his entire fortune in the panic of 1873, Ulysses S. Grant, former U.S. president, wrote his memoirs while dying of cancer to provide for his family. No self-pity, just action. That's the Stoic mindset, preparing for the worst while striving for the best. Modern psychology confirms the wisdom. Studies show that people who mentally rehearse crises experience less anxiety when they occur. The brain treats familiar threats as manageable, even when they're unpleasant. Here's how to practice this today. Grab a notebook and divide a page into 3 columns. In the first, describe your financial nightmare: job loss, medical bankruptcy, whatever keeps you awake. In the second, list every resource you'd still have: skills, relationships, public assistance programs. The third column, concrete steps you'd take in the first 72 hours. Update your resume, research food banks, sell unused items. This isn't morbid, it's strategic. Like a fire drill, it programs your brain to switch from panic to protocol when stress hits. The magic lies in the aftermath. Once you've walked mentally through ruin and survival, a quiet shift occurs. That promotion you're too scared to pursue. The career leap that terrifies you, they feel smaller now. Because when you've already faced your monster under the bed and discovered you can bear it, everyday risks lose their fangs. Seneca put it bluntly, the man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. So here's your challenge. Pick one financial fear, credit card debt, retirement shortfalls, unstable income, and run it through Epictetus' gauntlet. Not just surface-level worry, but visceral visualization. Then ask yourself, what's the smallest step I can take today to ensure against this? Maybe it's finally opening that high-yield savings account or learning a marketable side skill. Action shrinks anxiety faster than reassurance ever could. Watch what happens when you stop running from worst-case scenarios and start interrogating them. That phantom terror of poverty, it transforms into a checklist. The whispers of, what if I fail, become, here's how I'd rebound. Because true confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's the certainty that you've already survived it in your mind, and your spirit remains unbroken. The Stoics knew this secret. We suffer more from the shadows of our imagination than from the substance of reality. Hold up a lantern to those shadows, and they'll stop haunting you. Musonius Rufus stood before his students with a challenge that still echoes across centuries. If you accomplish something good with hard work, the labor passes quickly, but the good endures. If you do something shameful for pleasure, the pleasure passes quickly, but the shame endures. That's the heart of Stoic confidence, not the loud bravado of someone performing for applause, but the quiet certainty of a person whose actions align with their deepest beliefs. Picture two speakers at a town hall. One crafts their words to win nods from every faction. The other speaks plain truths, knowing some will bristle. The first leaves with hollow approval. The second, whether agreed with or not, commands respect that lingers long after the debate ends. Authenticity in Stoicism isn't about self-expression, it's about self-confrontation. Before you can stand firm in your convictions, you must first excavate them from under layers of social conditioning. Marcus Aurelius spent his mornings interrogating his own motives. Is this what I truly believe, or what I've been trained to say? That's the fork in the road most miss, the choice between echoing comfortable lies and voicing uncomfortable truths. Consider the whistleblower who risks career ruin to expose corruption, or the teenager who refuses to laugh at a cruel joke despite peer pressure. Their power doesn't come from defiance itself, but from the bedrock of integrity beneath it. People-pleasing isn't just weak, it's exhausting. Every suppressed opinion, every swallowed objection is a silent tax on your energy. Seneca described it as carrying a bowl of water without spilling a drop, an impossible feat that leaves you perpetually tense. Contrast that with Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a barrel and told Alexander the Great to step aside because he was blocking the sunlight. His radical authenticity wasn't rudeness, it was liberation from the exhausting performance of social niceties. Modern research confirms this. Studies show those who regularly suppress their opinions experience higher stress hormones and lower life satisfaction. The Stoic path offers an alternative. Speak your truth not to offend, but because silence would betray your soul. Here's where boldness and integrity intertwine. When Musonius taught that philosophy isn't about words but about actions, he was spotlighting the confidence that comes from congruence. Think of a musician who refuses to auto-tune imperfections out of their recordings, or a CEO who admits a flawed strategy rather than bluffing. Their vulnerability doesn't diminish their authority, it amplifies it, because authenticity, unlike posturing, can't be faked. Like a tree growing toward light without apology, there's an undeniable strength in being exactly what you are. Your challenge this week: voice one unpopular but honest opinion, not to provoke, but to practice the muscle of authenticity. Maybe it's pushing back on a misguided company policy everyone else accepts. Perhaps it's admitting you dislike a beloved film or political stance. Watch what happens. Some may disagree, but you'll discover something extraordinary. The ground doesn't swallow you. The sky doesn't fall. Instead, you'll feel a new solidity forming within, like marble settling into its foundation. Because confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's the presence of something more important than fear. Musonius left us with a final litmus test. If you were stripped of everything, your title, your wealth, your reputation, what would remain? That irreducible core is where your boldest self lives. Not in the applause of others, but in the quiet knowledge that you've spoken your truth when it mattered most. So tell me, what opinion have you been withholding that the world needs to hear? The answer might just be the key to unlocking the confidence you've sought all along. The sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the marble floors of Seneca's villa. As lamps flicker to life, the philosopher does something radical. He sits not with scrolls or correspondence, but with silence. His nightly ritual isn't about planning tomorrow, but excavating today. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, he writes, I examine my entire day and measure my words and deeds. This is the Stoic evening review, not a passive replay of events, but an active excavation of truth. Imagine holding up a mirror to your actions with the same unflinching honesty as a sculptor assessing a flawed statue. Where did you chip away at fear? Where did hesitation leave its mark? Most of us collapse into bed with exhaustion or distraction, numbing the day's lessons with screens or sleep. But Seneca's practice offers something far more potent: the chance to turn ordinary moments into stepping stones of growth. Picture two professionals ending identical days. One scrolls through social media until their eyes glaze over. The other spends 10 minutes asking, when did I speak with conviction today? When did I shrink? The first wakes up the same person, the second wakes up wiser. That's the alchemy of the evening review. It transforms time from something that passes through you into something that changes you. Here's how to adapt this practice tonight. Begin with Seneca's 3 core questions, but frame them through the lens of confidence building. First, what one action today proved my courage? Not grand gestures. Maybe you finally voiced an unpopular opinion in a meeting, or resisted the urge to downplay your achievements when complimented. Second, where did fear still hold the reins? Be specific. Did you avoid eye contact during a difficult conversation? Laugh nervously when asserting a boundary? No judgment, just observation. Third, and most transformative, how will this awareness shape tomorrow? This isn't about guilt, it's about geometry. You're charting the angle between who you were today and who you're becoming. History's most centered figures shared versions of this ritual. Benjamin Franklin tracked virtues in a notebook, marking progress with humble dots and crosses. Queen Elizabeth I reportedly ended each day with her chaplain, dissecting decisions with the rigor of a chess player analyzing moves. The common thread: they didn't let experience go to waste. Every interaction, every choice became raw material for refinement. Try this tactile variation. Keep a small stone on your nightstand, smooth enough to hold comfortably. Each evening, press it into your palm as you mentally walk through your day. When you recall a moment of authentic confidence, no matter how small, squeeze gently. The physical anchor trains your brain to spotlight victories you'd otherwise overlook. That time you held your ground with a pushy relative, squeeze. The email you sent without over-editing your expertise, squeeze. Over weeks, you'll notice subtle shifts, not because the stone changes, but because your awareness does. The Stoic twist lies in balancing rigor with compassion. Seneca cautioned against self-flagellation. Be harsh in your assessment, but kind in your response. Found yourself backtracking when challenged, note it, then script a firmer response for next time. Gave into people-pleasing, acknowledge the pattern, then rehearse a graceful no. This isn't about tallying failures, it's about converting them into drills. Like a musician practicing scales after a flawed performance, you're isolating the rough passages to smooth them. Tonight, as you turn off the lights, resist the urge to mentally scroll through tomorrow's to-do list. Instead, ask Seneca's defining question: what part of today's story will I carry forward? Maybe it's the warmth you felt after speaking your mind, or the unease that lingers from a moment of silence when your voice was needed. Both are compasses. The first points toward your growing strength, the second toward terrain still awaiting your courage. The true power of this practice reveals itself gradually. Over months, you'll notice fewer cringes during your reviews, not because you've become perfect, but because you've become intentional. Actions that once required effort, holding eye contact, claiming credit without apology, now flow naturally. That's the Stoic secret. Confidence isn't a trait you're born with, but a skill honed in the quiet moments when no one's watching but you, and each evening's honest reckoning. That's the whetstone sharpening your boldest self. We've traveled far together, from the trembling moments of self-doubt to the unshakable ground of Stoic confidence. Think of these last few minutes as stepping stones. First, the realization that true power lies not in controlling events, but in mastering your responses. Then, the courage to walk through fear rather than around it, like Marcus Aurelius leading troops into battle with a philosopher's calm. Preparation became your armor, not through endless what-ifs, but through the disciplined rehearsal of resilience. And finally, purpose, the compass that turns obstacles into fuel when aligned with your deepest values. These aren't just ideas, they're the four pillars holding up a life of boldness. Marcus left us a parting gift in his meditations. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength isn't reserved for emperors. It's in the single mother negotiating a raise, the artist sharing vulnerable work, the student speaking up despite shaking hands. Confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's the presence of something more important than fear. Your challenge now is simple but profound. Choose one pillar to strengthen this week. Maybe it's practicing the dichotomy of control during rush hour traffic, or doing a negative visualization drill before a big meeting. Perhaps it's finally having that difficult conversation you've avoided, grounding yourself in purpose rather than approval. Growth doesn't demand grand gestures, just consistent, intentional steps. This isn't goodbye. Think of it as an invitation to keep building. If this resonated with you, join our community of modern Stoics, hit subscribe, and let's keep turning wisdom into action. Because the world doesn't just need more knowledge, it needs more people who live with the quiet audacity to be unshakable. Your boldest chapter starts now. And remember, as Marcus would say, the fire inside you is stronger than any storm outside. Keep fanning those